Well, welcome to our podcast today. I'm your host, Travis Garland, the CEO of Kickstand AI, where we are charged with enhancing the voice and amplifying the impact of healthcare and wellness organizations through automations and AI technologies. Today, we're joined by someone whose journey from NYPD detective to kidney donor to chief strategy officer at Mobile Network 24 is nothing short of extraordinary. Michael Lalo is a man who certainly lives his mission, and after donating a kidney to a stranger in 2018, he didn't just walk away changed, he ran toward a new purpose. From leading the National Kidney Donation Organization to shaping strategy at the National Kidney Registry, Michael has become a driving force in transplant advocacy. Now at Mobile Network 24, he's helping revolutionize organ transport logistics with models that save lives in real time. Mobile Network 24 isn't your average transport company. It owns its own fleet, operates 24/7 dispatch, and uses real-time analytics to ensure organs and transplant teams arrive safely and swiftly. It's a bold vision, and Michael is at the helm. So in this episode, we're going to talk about 4 specific areas. First, personal story of Michael's kidney donation and how it fuels his leadership. Second, why Mobile Network 24 built its own internal travel department and how it's transforming transplant logistics. We'll then hop into the role of AI integration companies like Kickstand AI in optimizing organ transport and empowering transplant teams. And then we'll wrap it all up with the future of transplant ecosystem and how the collaboration of our organizations can drive it forward. All of that through the eyes of a powerful strategist. So let's dive in. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Travis, I'm going to make sure I carry you around anywhere I go so you can give me that wonderful, probably not worthy introduction. I appreciate it.
Fair. Well, I'll tell you what, I know that you host a podcast called Let's Talk Transplant, and It spotlights donor stories. But before we jump into some of those particularly meaningful stories, I'd love for you to walk us through how your personal journey intersects with Mobile Network 24.
Sure, I'll keep it sort of brief, but I think it's important to start at the beginning. So, like you mentioned, I worked for the New York City Police Department. I was a detective, and I was sitting at my desk, and at the time, it was April of 2018, something came across the computer about a police officer who needed a kidney. First time in my life that I've ever really heard of organ donation. It was just one of those things where it's like a fellow police officer is in need. So I talked to my wife. I said, hey, something about this kidney donation thing. What do you think I should do? And she's like, call up. She goes, give me the number. She's like, I'll call too. So I called the phone number. It's a bit of a long story, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to donate to this police officer named Tommy Alexander. And then I just kind of put it out of my mind. Every donor, specifically non-directed donors, always have this like aha moment, right? This like light switch. But for me, it wasn't that moment. I tried to help a police officer, I couldn't do it, so I just moved on. And then about 4 months later, in September, I saw a New York Post article about a gentleman named Mark Weiner who needed a kidney, and he got a billboard donated to him in Times Square, and basically said, "Hi, my name is Mark, and I need a kidney." So for me, that was my aha moment. I was 46, never heard of kidney donation in my entire life, and now within 4 months, I see this come, across my purview. So I did some research. I got tested, and I didn't really know much about the National Kidney Registry or the voucher program or things of that nature. And when they called me up, they told me that I wasn't a match for Mark. But through all the research that I did on Google, I learned that you could just give the kidney away, to a stranger. So I asked the Transplant Center if I could do that. Of course, they said yes. And then in December of that year, 2018, I donated altruistically as a non-directed donor through the National Kidney Registry. And my kidney went to, I knew it was a female. I knew she was on the East Coast. I later learned out it was Walter Reed, the Transplant Center. And then ultimately I did meet my recipient. We ended up getting connected on Facebook and all that kind of good stuff. But the other 2 situations, what happened with Tommy, what happened with Mark, having this campaign and not receiving a donor. I got involved with the National Kidney Donation Organization. Ultimately, that's like you mentioned, I became president at that organization. But I just wanted to advocate like from the beginning. I wanted to share my story. There's a lot of road bumps, if you will, or bumps in the road, for donors and for patients, and it feels like it doesn't have to be that way. So that's kind of my jump start into like the advocacy world. And like you said, I worked for the National Kidney Donation Organization, then I worked for the National Kidney Registry, and now I'm working at Mobile Network 24, which is totally different because it's deceased organs. NKR and NKDO were all on the living side.
The patients are deceased. The organs are still living.
We're still living. Yeah, we're living when we donate the organ, and pray to God that when the procedure's over, we're still living. But kidney donation specifically, and even liver donation is very, very safe. And it's something I would strongly encourage people to to
Yeah.
look into.
Of course, of course, and hopefully, part of what we're doing here in this conversation on our podcast is really going to amplify the voice of organizations like yours. And I know in your podcast specifically, Let's Talk Transplant, you've mentioned things like the work that you're doing is honoring the gift of life,
Right.
and it certainly resonated with me as I was thinking about this conversation. And I'm curious, it is different, Mobile Network 24, and how you kind of moved through your professional space. How do you make sure that the passion and the ethos of your own personal work resonates with Mobile Network 24?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll tell you a very brief story. So when I first got hired by Mobile Network 24, and their CEO and founder, his name is Brian Smith, and his wife Karen also works for the company. She's pretty much in charge of the whole dispatch area. They invited me obviously to Tampa, which is where our office is, and I walked in their facility, and the first thing I saw was this beautiful wall, and on the wall were these sort of like sketched, like almost like pencil drawing pictures of a heart, lungs,
Mm-hmm.
kidney, liver. Yeah.
Yep.
And underneath that were these glass jars with gems in them, colored gems. Each organ had a gem. And
Okay.
I said, what is that? And she said, oh, Karen's like, it's an idea I came up with sort of to hone into everyone that works here, like the meaning of each transplant. And every time we transport successfully an organ, which we have done 100% of the time, that we've never not successfully transported an organ that we were responsible to transport. And we've even transported because other companies, weren't able to fulfill the mission. We drop a gem in the jar, and it was an amazing visual. And I said, "Can I take a picture of that?" And she's like, "Yeah, of course."
Kidding.
And then right above that, which is now trademarked, because as soon as I walked, my first act as chief strategy officer, I said, "It says transporting second chances." Right? And I said to Karen, I said, who came up with, like, where'd you, like, who's the author of that? And she's like, it's me. Like, I came up with that. I go, what? I said, did you trademark this? And she's like,
Yes.
no. And I'm not lying. I got on the phone
Great.
with the lawyer from the National Kidney Registry, and I said, I need to trademark something. How do I do that? And he connected me with the right person. And now, as we speak, we own the trademark to transporting second chances.
Transporting second chances is powerful.
Yeah, right.
So your role as the chief strategy officer, obviously you stepped in and rapidly did some good work for them to make sure you're trademarking such a powerful phrase. That's no doubt for sure. But how do you infuse your experience, not only as I'll say as a detective, but also your experience as a donor, into the strategies that you put into the company?
So Brian's wife also is a nurse by trade, although she doesn't practice anymore. So
Okay.
I think, her medical background, me being a donor, I bring that. I want to be careful. I don't want to say like I use that, but it is part of my identity. And I want people to know that if I'm talking to them about a service that we provide, I wouldn't be behind this if I didn't believe in it. Right. So, you already said a couple times that I'm a retired NYPD detective. So when you retire, you get a pension, right? So not that I can, I have 3 children, 2 dogs, and a wife. Not that that's going to sustain me forever. But the point is, I do have like income coming in because of the pension. So now I have the ability to make sure I choose where I want to work because it aligns with the values, that I have. I think it's kind of really easy, when I'm talking to people, I talk about, and I talk about my experience, right? And I actually got to meet the person who transported my organ from Weill Cornell in Manhattan and drove it to Walter Reed, because they were standing there and they said, as I'm, with the robe, with the back open, and they're like, oh, Michael, this is the person who's going to be transporting your kidney. I was like, oh my gosh. And like, please buckle up and, like,
Yes.
don't drive too fast. But to be honest, I didn't give it much thought after that, right? And I even gave this big speech. The National Kidney Registry invited me in 2019 to give a keynote speech for their gala that they were having every year. And I thanked a ton of people. I thanked the surgeons and the family, my family, and I thanked the phlebotomists and the nurses. I never thanked the transport component of it, and it never really like came to me. And then I know it's a little self-serving now because I work for a transport company, but I like to say that organizations that transport organs from point A to point B, and now if there's any surgeons listening, they're probably going to like tune out right now. They're as equally important to the process as the surgeon, because you could be the most skilled surgeon in the world taking out this heart or taking out these lungs, and then the perfusionist gets them all ready to go and it goes in the cooler. but it's the transport company who's transporting it either by plane or by car from point A to point B. And that's a tremendous responsibility. I think one of the things we do really well at Mobile Network 24 is to ensure that everyone that works, for us and with us, understands how important that is. That it's not just an Amazon package, right? It's not just any old package that's being transported. It literally is life. Like, you are carrying life, in the backseat of your car or on the plane or in your hands when you're bringing it into the building. So I think we do a good job of selecting the right people and ensuring that, again, the values are aligned with us.
Life for another individual is a powerful thing. And you began a little bit of your story here talking about how the impact of a specific phrase, the impact of billboards and the impact of transporting an organ, it obviously has a direct impact on that person, but the story doesn't stop there, right? The impact that person now has as their ability to have a second chance has been expanded. And every single person that touches that individual that received that organ is receiving that same impact. And it's threefold, fivefold, sixfold over and over again, that impact that a single organ can have. And that's a powerful thing. You're sort of circling back to an important piece here around the transport. The idea that Mobile Network 24 is in that space is something that is a bit of a game changer, because you guys are doing something that's rather unique in the industry. So tell me a little bit about that internal travel department and how you came up with that concept as a strategist, and where's that going?
Sure. Well, I can't personally take credit for the internal travel department because Brian came up with that before I got to Mobile Network 24. But I think it's important.
Did you trademark that phrase too, the internal travel department?
No, you know what? I should look into that. We did not, but I don't. You know what, Travis? I'm going to write that down as a note right now. I'm going to after this call, I may see if that's even possible. But Brian started 30 plus years ago as a black car company, and he had a nationwide black car service, and then COVID happened, and as you can imagine, really affected the black car business. So he transitioned and pivoted, which I think is phenomenal, and started his own ambulance company because, as he says, logistics is logistics. Whether I'm moving, people around in black cars, whether I'm, moving ambulances around to go pick people up and transport them, and then he's licensed, or we're licensed to work as an ambulance company in like 25 states in the United States, and then he got into the organ transport business, specifically just driving. And he was working as a subcontractor for another company, and then parted ways and basically did it on his own because he's like, oh, I could do this, I think, with a higher class of service and better. And then a mutual friend of ours spoke to him and said, you should really look into doing the air as well. And they got together and when you're talking about an internal travel department, it sounds a little weird, but the way we see ourselves is, we're the travel department, right, for any of our partners. So what does that mean? So all major companies, American Express, Goldman Sachs, Amazon, just, name it. They have like an internal corporate travel department, kind of is what they call it. And, if the CEO needs to go somewhere or one of the executives needs to go somewhere, they call their travel department internally and they get their jets ready, the cars ready, and they make all the arrangements. So, number one, why couldn't we do that for transport? And then the second thing, which is, I think, the biggest game changer of them all, is the way the system works now is there are many transportation departments, right, in the organ transport logistics business. Pretty much most of them, almost all of them, operate the same way. A lot of them do have their own vehicles, but many of them subcontract out the work, right? So they get third-party providers, and I can talk about in a second why that's a little bit tricky. But when it comes to the aircraft, most of them, if not all, get their aircraft from another provider, right? So we're going to call it ABC Air, right? Okay. So ABC Air provides the planes for the organ transport company, right? But ABC Air has to make money. So ABC Air tax on a fee, right? They give it to the organ transport company, and then the organ transport company has to make money. So they tack on a fee to give it to, Garland Hospital, right? So Brian was like, well, what if we had our own planes? Whether we bought them or we leased them. And, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. There's obviously a high cost to Mobile Network 24, but we can offer I would say not even the same, better service, I would say, at a much lower cost because you're eliminating the broker fees. Okay. And there really isn't any way for organ transport company, B to not charge you those fees because they're not in control of the plane. there's repositioning fees. There's all these fees that it comes with. I don't fly private. I don't have the money to fly private, but I have learned about all these different types of fees that come with flying private or using charter planes. And that's where the real cost is. And we've done this analysis, and it is proven. Like I could prove it with real data that by having a fixed, consistent rate over a period of a year, right, will without a doubt save any organization money. And on the small end, I did an analysis, or we did analysis on a small transplant center, and we only saved them. It's a simulation, right? Of course, because they didn't use us, but using 2023 numbers, we know exactly where their organs came from. It's all open source data from OPTN and SRTR. We got all the information from there, and we overlaid our pricing. So if you would have used us, we would have only saved 1%. And I'm like, oh man, 1%, that's not a lot of money, right?
Yeah,
it was $227,000. 1%. 1%.
That's $250,000 is 1%. That's a fair chunk of savings, even at 1%.
Right. So there's larger hospitals and OPOs where the savings would be in the millions. Right. So that's putting money back into those organizations. So my hope would be that they would hire more full-time employees. They would do things to improve their process, maybe with AI, and they would, be able to do more transplants. So, Brian says all the time, our CEO says all the time, it's all about the transplant. Sometimes I think to his detriment, but that's where we're at. I think Brian probably could have sailed off into the sunset a while ago. But him and his wife chose to stay in this space now and keep working.
So I know that I will be asking a couple of questions about some of the AI piece that you just mentioned. The question really about the fees and being associated with air travel, all the exhaustive kinds of things that come along with the maintenance associated with planes and airport taxiing and all sorts of stuff that you're talking about. That seems like a quagmire of issues that a basic car transport company does not have to deal with. So when you guys have stepped into that space, what have you been finding are the largest logistical kinds of issues that you're experiencing? Is it the fees, or are there other kinds of things of trying to manage that type of that portion of the business?
Well, for us specifically, it's ensuring that we have enough equipment, and personnel to accommodate the demand. So there has been a couple of occasions where, all of our planes are in use, but we have a relationship with a provider, and we get the aircraft from them. And the question I asked Brian is like, oh, well, will we guarantee this client, X number of dollars per, Hobbs hour, right? That's how it gets calculated. Don't ask me what Hobbs means. I have no idea. So how does that translate? And he goes, well, that's what's on the bill is what we agreed to. And, if we have to eat it, we eat it.
Yes, sometimes a loss. Okay.
I mean, it doesn't we try not to have that happen too often, but that's what I'm saying. There's, don't get me wrong. All the other people in the space, I'm not saying that they're not doing great work. They are. The company that transported, my kidney is. I know which one it was, and they're, in essence, a competitor of ours, and they do great work. Do I think we do it at a higher level of service? Yes. Do I think we can offer a much more affordable, consistent, transparent pricing? Yes. So, but I don't want, I wouldn't want like the other people to stop doing what they're doing because then there'll be less transplants, right? I just think, if more people adopted this model, like if you ask me like what's a goal, I think maybe one of the questions you might have sent me is like what's a goal? I would love to see this sort of disrupt the space enough where it forces the other companies to potentially go into that model.
That's fair. So if you, and maybe I'll transition a little bit into the AI piece here, because the logistics of transport companies cannot be a simple thing. How do you guys manage with your current methods? And do you see AI playing a significant portion? Maybe where do you see AI playing a portion in your business?
Yeah, I thought about that a lot because I knew you were going to ask me that. I'm not, don't get upset with me, Travis. But there, some things may not be right or perfect for AI. Okay. So what I would say is for the offer end, right? So when an OPO makes an offer, organ procurement organization makes an offer to a transplant center, I know AI is in that space now, and there's people who are trying to help these transplant centers and these surgeons make better, quicker, faster acceptances or declines of these offers. I think that's tremendous. When I think about like the logistics component, um, I was like racking my brain on where it could play a crucial role, and I kind of became like a little at a loss for words. I don't know. There's probably like some internal processes maybe
Mhm.
where AI could help, but I don't see like AI. Like a call comes in and like AI dispatches John Smith, to
Mhm.
go pick up a heart or a lung team from point A and bring them to point B. Like I don't. There's so many like nuances, and obviously this cargo, if you will, or this package, for
Yeah.
lack of a better word, is so precious that I would be really um, cautious about totally relying upon like an AI based system to do that. And now there is someone else, I think, working in the space who are trying to um, use sort of AI in conjunction with all of the transport companies. So I believe she put together this like sort of like an app or a program where a transplant center can like very quickly, with a touch of a couple buttons, find out like what aircraft and what logistical equipment is available for them to use to to service that mission. But
Mhm.
I'm trying to think like it's sort of even like with the planes. I don't know. Before you bringing it up, I haven't talked to Brian about it either. I'm interested, and after this
Yeah.
call, I'm probably going to talk to him a little bit more about that and see like
Sure.
where he
Of
thinks
course.
AI. But it's a real hands-on thing. I'll give you an example. When I worked in the
Okay.
police department, I worked in this dignitary protection unit, and we were in charge with the United Nations General Assembly. That's like we organized all the foreign and domestic visits into the city, and I'm talking like 900 plus detectives a day had to be assigned, right? And we would assign them pretty much manually, right? We would
Mhm.
get the information and I would be clicking on, Detective Garland and Detective Lalo goes here, and Detective Smith and Detective Jones goes here. And someone said, why can't you just, at the time it wasn't called AI, but why can't we just auto populate? Like you just get this,
Mhm.
Excel sheet, if you will, of names and
Of
their
course.
ID numbers and stuff. And can't we just like spit it out into there? But, the UN General Assembly is so nuanced. And, I get like an example would be, the president of Mexico comes in and these two detectives, guys or girls, have been on this detail for so long because they've developed a familiarity with the Secret Service and the Mexican protection team that comes over, that I wouldn't want to just auto populate it, right? Because I wouldn't want two random people. I really need these two specific people to be there. So we tried it, and it just didn't work because there was such nuances to
Yeah.
assigning people that we couldn't just randomly do it. So anyway, that's like I feel like the logistics component of organ transport is kind of the same. There's so many nuances. Things are changing sometimes so quickly. Not that AI can't adapt quickly, but
Mhm.
changing so quickly that if if like you got to have like the one-on-one talk with, if you're Dr. Garland or Nurse Garland, and I'm the person from dispatch, like we kind of need to have a conversation. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And it certainly sounds like there's a lot of hands-on necessity that happens in the transplant space. And that does not sound very surprising at all.
Yeah.
Oftentimes what comes with that is with that is a lot of manual kinds of things. Like things don't get moved necessarily unless someone's touching something.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, a package is not going to move itself, but the ability to know where it's at and who's picking it up and
Sure.
those fantastic little updates you get,
Sure.
that kind of thing is in those automation spaces. So
Yeah.
I would say that there's probably some opportunities around maybe the automation of some of that content. And I would say transport companies and those that are responsible for making sure that things are moving around rely quite heavily on automating the communication lines. And that's kind of a curious space. So if I were to ask maybe a question around when you think about the amount of manual touches that has to happen, are there areas where you would say, man, this every time I get up and deal with this manual thing or this hiccup that happens or this person forgot to do something or is out on vacation and we always have to bring somebody in, where do those manual kinds of processes come into your mind where you would say, boy, that's just an aggravation?
I'm trying to think. I mean, so I was told, the number is probably not exactly spot on, but I go to a lot of these conferences and stuff, and I was told that to transplant an organ, somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 touch points, 200 people have touched the case, right?
Wow.
When I say
Okay.
touch the case, in the sense of everything from finance, right, the whole logistics, the transplant center, the OPO, all
Hmm.
the people on the OPO side. There's a lot of touch points, right, to moving an organ, recovering an organ and a moving organ from point A to point B. So, although I don't know if I could specifically pick out something, except what I said before about the organ offers is definitely a possibility of using AI, and there's companies out there doing that now with the
Hmm.
with living donation. There's potentially, I think, on the front end, processing the donors up front using AI, I think might be an area that's worth exploring because these nurses, there's a lot of manual stuff that they're doing
Hmm.
that could probably be automated, by donor just
Yeah.
interacting with some AI. AI, do you call them AI person? I don't know what you call AI.
Yeah. An agent.
AI
Yeah.
engine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, again, until you contacted me, it's not really been a thought in my mind, but I can tell you that you've planted a seed in my head where I want to take a look and see, what are we doing on a daily basis where, AI could, potentially, speed
Hmm.
it up and benefit. Because anything we could do, if think about it, if you created a program and I know it's going to sound silly, but if it generated or helped have one more transplant, that's good. I'm
Yeah.
good, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, of course, I want
Absolutely.
hundreds and thousands, but that's one person now who can whose life is changed and saved. That's another person who now moves up on the transplant list. That's that person's family, right? Their
Hmm.
friends, their coworkers, whose lives are changed and improved because this person got the transplant. This person now is able to maintain a job and pay their taxes and contribute to society in whatever way they were beforehand. So I don't think I answered your question, but I danced around it a lot.
I think what it really does signal is there are some pretty powerful opportunities in the space, and it's not for sake of the fact that you haven't spent the time thinking about it, because that's not the case, right? You've got a lot of things on your plate on trying to make sure that you're strategically moving the organization forward. The idea of automations and AI agents or agentic AI, those spaces hold tremendous promise. And whether it's something as basic as making sure that the word is out and having an active campaign and a voice, being
Sure.
able to actively work with the OPOs that are out there and
Yeah.
developing new programs, being able to track organs as they're being moved through the process, following up with individuals that have received organs, and maybe starting to establish other kinds of programs post transplant where you may be involved with those kinds of things. There's that kind of stuff is the tip of the iceberg, but I bet
Yep.
internally there are some opportunities there for automations at the start, and certainly the agentic AI capabilities are they're growing so profoundly quick that it would be a great opportunity just to sit down and have a deeper conversation off of this
Absolutely.
podcast. But I think what I'm hearing you talk about is that the space of mobile network 24 has been a powerful one, has been one that's saved lives, and certainly has been one that's transporting second chances, right? And the idea that we could do that in a way that amplifies that space and saves more lives, there's probably no better mission than doing those kinds of things. So
Yeah, it's good.
while
Good work.
I think, yeah, say that one more time. I
I said
missed
it.
you.
I said it's good work. It makes you
It
feel
is.
good.
It's fantastic work,
Yeah,
right? It's a mission to live your life by, right, or shoot
exactly.
for. So it is something that when we think about what the vision of the future of our work really is, it's a powerful one, and I would love to sit down and chat with you. But maybe what I'll do here is end with maybe giving you the table, Michael. I know that there are plenty of things that folks would love to hear about with respect to organ donors. How do I become a donor? How do I make sure I sign in my driver's license, if you will, those kinds of things, right? But there's so many other ways maybe to get involved. So I'll let you have the floor for as long as you'd like it, and tell us a little bit about where you think the future of donorship comes in, and how can we get more and more involved.
Travis, my wife would say what you just did is very dangerous by telling me that I have the floor for
Uh-oh.
as long as I need. No, I will keep it brief, but I want to so touch on. Um, uh, I'm going to touch on something first, and I think I'll finish with the organization. So one of the things I want to tell you and to tell anyone that's listening, and this comes from however many years it's been since 2018, December 2018 till today is October of 2025 that we're recording this. What I would say is that transplant is very slow to change. Transplant is very slow to adapt new things that they're not comfortable with. Transplant is like working like 40 years ago. And, I can give you a gazillion examples, but, like a great one is, the National Kidney Registry. I think, I don't know the number off the top of my head now, but they're well over 11,000 facilitated kidney transplants over the last, 17 or so years. Well, how do they do that? Is because they have a couple of transport companies that work, in conjunction with them, and they fly these kidneys on commercial flights, right? Okay, well, they were the first ones to do that. And, the CEO, Garrett Hill, was told, you can't fly a kidney on a commercial flight. What are you, crazy? It's never been done. What happens if this happens? What happens if this happens, right? And, I remember, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the doctor flew with it because they were so afraid of like what, would happen with this kidney. Now we're putting kidneys on these commercial flights to the tune of, 1,000 plus, a year, right? So there's so many moments in transplant where someone had to take a chance. Because if we just keep doing what we're doing, we're never going to increase transplants. So, bringing it back to AI, I would say, don't be afraid, right? There are things that you could do in a controlled environment to test this out, to see if it really is going to benefit and is going to improve and is going to increase transplants. So from that end of it, for anyone who's going to be listening to this and is concerned, I don't, get concerned. I understand why, because if it's a living donor, my wife, I think I might have told you when you and I spoke before, my wife is a liver donor. She donated a portion of her liver to a work colleague. I'm a kidney donor. So from the living side, this is a precious gift, right? But from the deceased donor side, it's also a precious gift. And they want to, I think sometimes the transplant world is paralyzed because they want to honor that gift in such a way that they don't want any harm to come to it, which I understand. But, it's almost it's sort of, they would say like a paralysis by analysis, right? They're paralyzed because they're afraid of doing this thing that seems uncomfortable because something could happen to that organ. And that's good, but it's also preventing us in transplant from moving forward. So that's definitely one thing I wanted to get out there, that we can't be afraid. We have to embrace new technology, and we have to embrace new ways of facilitating these transplants, whether it be living or deceased. And, AI is certainly one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Your voice around certainly what got you here, Michael. Your family is right along with you. The idea that don't be afraid, that's a powerful thing. We've certainly heard plenty of individuals talk about a couple of different scenarios. Either I'm afraid of AI, or I've tried AI and it hasn't worked. I've tried AI and I spent way too much money for something that should have cost far less money, right? And so all those scenarios come about. We know that our world is changing, and certainly to be a little bit behind on that sort of technology space that transplant industry may be. I would imagine there's a lot of folks pushing forward and wanting to make sure, certainly for the sake of where we're all leaning, I would say we have to continue to lean into that space. So I'll end us here and just thank you, Michael Lalo, for your time with us today. Certainly a passion of yours. I love that you're transporting second chances, and certainly I wish you and Mobile Network 24 all the best.
Thank you, Travis. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Mr. Lalo. I will.
If there's anything you need me to redo, or if there's like a question you want that didn't get answered,
I think we got a really good set of questions. I loved your answers. I think your passion definitely is coming through. I would say that the opportunity for me to take this, I know there's going to be some cuts out of this that I'll be able to splice out. I will get you a recording, make sure you've got everything you need on your side as well. So no problems there. And maybe I'll ask the next step of this, which for me, frankly, it's really getting some content created for Kickstand AI. But you're mentioning things that I would love to sit down with you and Brian and others to just say, hey, here's where I think AI could be. Here's where I think Kickstand can help. And certainly if you guys spend a little bit of time thinking about, oh man, this is an aggravation, this is a pain point, usually those are the kinds of spaces that are quite easily handled. Those kind of become those first spaces. But what I might do is throw a couple of things at you, get on your books maybe for a half hour, maybe in a few days, and then I'll get this content over to you and we can chat some more, make sure it makes sense to you, and take another step.
Sweet. Awesome.
You like it?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Michael. You're fantastic. I really appreciate your time, sir. Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for reaching out. Appreciate it.
All right, you got it.
Bye, Travis.
All right, bye-bye.